My son, a terrible darkness has returned to our world. As before, it seeks to annihilate everything that we hold dear. I go to face it, knowing I may not return.
They're coming! They're coming back!
All my life I have lived by the sword. I've seen kingdoms burn, and watched brave heroes die in vain. It's been difficult for me to trust after losing so much. But from you, I have learned patience, tolerance, and faith. Open fire! Anduin, I now believe, as you do, that peace is the noblest aspiration. But to preserve it, you must be willing to fight.
After all these years of working on Warcraft games, I think it still elicits this deep passion in us.
And we've been at this for over 20 years. And every day is a new challenge. Every day I feel like I'm 16 walking into this place. And in this particular expansion, we felt it was really time to go back to our roots.
The Legion expansion is essentially round 3 of the Mortal Worlds fight against the Burning Legion.
The Burning Legion unleashed upon Azeroth. They're back with a vengeance. And we find our heroes having to put aside their differences and, focus on this new threat.
These cinematics really kind of set the stage, set the tone and the theme for the adventure. And this cinematic in particular is integral to the fantasy of Legion.
We've been making these cinematics for a very long time. That's the fabric of WoW. And when everybody's firing on both cylinders on this piece, which they have, it raises the bar to a new height.
We've been very fortunate over the years to have, what I believe is one of the best cinematics team in all of gaming.
These animators are world class, and they're able to dig in and find a different gear, even a gear that we hadn't even truly thought of.
And the work that Mark Messenger and his team have done on this cinematic has set a new bar for us, and so perfectly captures the tone and the tension, the scale of the conflict to come.
Okay.
What was the first time you heard about the idea behind this expansion?
Basic directive that we got from the game team was that they wanted it to be D-Day. This is the big confrontation, the return of the Burning Legion.
Open fire!
What is the best way to encapsulate this idea of, the Horde and the Alliance both fighting bitterly against this, unstoppable foe? We can do big action, we can make amazing things happen. But what makes you care about it, I guess, is what I always come back to. We started trying to think of, well, what could be the heart of the piece? And eventually we did land on Varian. His relationship with his son is very well known. It's very important to the game. And so when that presented itself, it was just like, oh, yeah, that's probably it.
We have a king going to war, and all of it really matters is a message from a father to a son.
Exactly.
My son, a terrible darkness has returned to our world. As before, it seeks to annihilate everything that we hold dear. I go to face it, knowing I may not return.
With the monologue between the dad and his son, it's a little bit of a throwback to the Arthur's piece.
My son, the day you were born, the very forests of Lordaeron whispered the name Arthas.
It is definitely important for us to have that echo of the Lich King. We wanted to, say, well, that's kind of the bar. We want to try to achieve something emotionally, but how are you going to bring the spectacle? The very first thing that popped into my head was gunship.
It's been difficult for me to trust after losing so much.
We decided, okay, we want that. We sold it to the game team. It was not a sell. They were like, yes, please, that sounds great. This thing is so heavy as an asset. Are there issues with actually rendering it?
It's a big set, but it's moving. There were a lot of technical requirements to making sure that we could keep all of our assets, our characters, their clothes, their armor, their hair, all in sync, and making sure that all worked was kind of a challenge.
For simming, it ended up being a huge challenge because just moving a character with cloth through space, it's going to be dragged back. We had to develop a lot of tech for counteracting that motion. It was a great undertaking.
From the animation perspective, the biggest challenge was, even though you're animating one character, we almost need to kind of like layer the animation, because whatever the character was doing, he would also be affected by what the ship was doing. And you have hundreds of other pieces that you need to take into consideration. Every change was like a ripple effect.
The modeling team just did a fantastic job on it, and surfacing as well.
First step is we see the concept art, we get super excited, and then we start thinking, all right, so how are we going to build it? So we had to restructure our pipelines to be able to manage multiple assets at once in one scene. It's 14 pieces, and it's a massive, massive asset. Probably the biggest asset we've built.
To reinterpret the game asset into the cinematic space, you're going to have to add the idea of set dressing the piece with a lot of little elements. So we pieced it together bit by bit.
For rigging, it's the ropes kept multiplying, and then we needed extra controls on them, and it just kept getting bigger and bigger.
I wanted to add clouds opening up and have lots of very broad sunlight streaks run across the deck.
Give you a real sense of the scale. Yeah.
So we've got this awesome gunship. It needs to be populated, and that was another thing that we really had to figure out how we were going to do.
We were looking at the overall complexity of the show. We need to do something, again, that we haven't really done before, which is maybe mocap.
We kind of felt it was the right call to use motion capture for the background characters. We didn't need to, we knew we wouldn't need to tweak the animation. It was pretty much going to work out of the box.
We get on the stage at Activision, and you know, and here's our animators dressed up with the balls all over and the tracking suits, and it was hilarious. It was just really fun. We had a great day.
You remember when we were trying to figure out how to get people to fall off the deck?
The guys at Activision built like a 7-foot ramp, and then they start rolling down the deck. And I'm like, I told you not to do stuff like... No, they're like children. They just couldn't help themselves.
Nobody got hurt, right?
Yeah, we had spotters. You guys were spotting. So, but I was still nervous. It does bring that ship to life. You just read those human shapes moving around, and your brain kind of does the rest. We deal with such fantastic characters and environments and situations, and yet we want you to believe in them. We want you to invest in them. So sometimes it's about making something that's really realistic looking to the eye, and sometimes it's just about pushing it into a level of fantasy that somehow is still resonant in a believable way. Even things like, you know, when we've been talking about what the ocean should look like, how tall should the waves be?
The ocean, I think, is a big achievement for our effects here. It's an ocean surface that you can be on the deck with that camera as well as 100 or 1,000 feet in the sky, and it does exactly what we want.
We had a mixture of ships on the deck. The Alliance ships and the Horde ships on the water are all resurrected from Miss Pandaria.
What's important from the very start was to try and make it feel like Alliance and Horde aren't just fighting the Burning Legion, they're also fighting the environment.
Of course, the Broken Isles themselves, the destination, which would be this awesome zone from the game recreated for the cinematic with this huge fell storm, which Digimat has just done a pretty fantastic job of realizing.
Digimat will paint something, effects will then contribute to it with their own volumetric simulations. Those are the kind of shots that really sell where you are.
The biggest challenge that we would face in the show is not just Varian, but also Sylvanas, and trying to really make both of these very iconic characters believable.
With Varian, we found that fine balance and still look like an epic Blizzard character.
I wanted him to feel like he's been through stuff and make him just maybe a little bit more worn out, you know, a little bit more haggard, some chisel to the face.
Sylvanas Windrunner, she's like the battle queen. We thought this would be a great opportunity to make her feel like she's ready to take on the Burning Legion. There's a very interesting fine line we had to tread there to make her not come off too white, you know, or too blue. She's undead, but she's not a zombie.
People have no idea how much work goes into these characters. We have moments where we're literally just centered on his eyes. I rush out of the studio just looking at people's eyes to see who had blue eyes. I was just literally just walking around, just, do you have blue eyes? Do you have blue eyes? Let me look at your eyes.
This is the first time we've taken hair that's gone from dry to underwater. And then he gets out of the water, so it's drying. But it ended up being super fun and a good challenge for us to push it that far.
We did something else that we haven't done before, which is we brought in performers to flesh out the performances themselves. Jim played Varian, and Anna is an actual archer who came in for Sylvanas. It's kind of magical for me because you guys go and you do your due diligence, and then I see it and it's like all of a sudden the emotion is there.
I now believe, as you do, that peace is the noblest aspiration. But to preserve it, you must be willing to fight.
We spent a lot of time working on our heroes, but we spent a lot of time working on our bad guys.
We had these 3 major classes of demons, and we looked for opportunities to introduce ways to have them glow a little bit here and there. For the Infernal, that was simple.
The Fellbat is actually a design that we got from the game team for this expansion. In the Felgarden, they've had that kind of class of demons in the past, but this is sort of the latest iteration of that.
The first time we saw the, like the Felgarden concept, it was like, wow, that's so cool. He will always be moving really fast on screen. Just decided to make sure that it looks very dynamic.
Pretty much all departments heavily involved in that final shot. What is it, 460?
Yeah, and I think it grew. We were able to add more characters into that scene even, and make it really feel like, you know, the worst was yet to come.
Like, man, it is really us against the might of the Burning Legion.
It's not just about animation and character, lighting and effects. There's water in that shot. There's a giant crashing wave just to add a little bit on top of the whole thing.
It's a really complex shot because there are like so many characters, and every motion of one character affects the other.
That final shot is amazing.
For Azeroth!
I feel like on every level, we've really dedicated ourselves to improving our game that's worthy of the canon of being in the world of Warcraft. It's been a real pleasure for me to work with all of you, as always. You know, I hope we keep doing this until we retire.
Who says anything about retiring?
This expansion is about the greatest threat in the Warcraft universe, the Burning Legion, attempting to destroy all life on Azeroth and the planet itself. It was really important for us to have the Burning Legion in this expansion, and the natural place for us to go was the Broken Isles.
We wanted the Legion invading Azeroth itself. We wanted the Legion crashing down and threatening our homelands, but in a place we hadn't seen before. Broken Isles is an opportunity for us to go very, very deep back into World of Warcraft's history, back to the War of the Ancients 10,000 years ago, and see some of the places where these climactic battles happened.
During the Great Sundering 10,000 years ago, much of the Broken Isles sank into the sea, so half of it remained above but shattered and formed kind of an island chain. Gul'dan, the warlock, raised the broken part from the bottom of the sea, bringing the Tomb of Sargeras to our world.
The Broken Isles is the location of our very powerful Pillars of Creation. We find out that this is going to be a central component of how to defeat the Legion and seal back the Tomb of Sargeras.
The history of this area is so strong, and it's always been a hope of mine that we would get an opportunity to visit this landscape, visit the Broken Isles. We get to understand a little bit more about what happened there.
It used to be the epicenter of Night Elf civilization, and basically ever since it was destroyed in a cataclysmic event, pretty much no one has been there.
We're trying to define what is the lore. The lore tells us why things look the way they do.
Broken Isles is visually stunning. It fits perfectly with the whole storyline behind Legion.
We want to be able to feature different types of environments, and the best way to do that throughout an expansion is to actually have separation.
The continent of the Broken Isles is comprised of Azuna, Val-Shara, High Mountain, Stormheim, and Suramar. We have gone to great lengths to make sure that the game feels open and explorable.
Broken Isles was an interesting one from a world-building perspective. There's so many key landmarks to this landscape. That was a real driving factor in how we ultimately put it together.
As players delve deeper into the quest and the backstories, they'll start seeing how sort of all these ancient civilizations, Night Elf, Naga, Highborn, how they all fit together.
Telling the story of those different cultures. There is a lot of back and forth that goes on between environment and with level design, so that we can help settle on how that color palette, how the lighting, how the textures, all that's going to fit together.
Azuna is the first zone that we started to make in this expansion. Anytime we start a zone, we like to look at real-world examples. So with Azuna, we were thinking a little more Greek Isle, a lot of like olive trees and that sort of like broad pastures that you would see. But then we added a lot more to it. We added all the Night Elf culture.
Azuna is a zone that feels very inviting and very beautiful. As players delve deeper into its dark secrets, they'll find out that not all is as it seems. these ancient Night Elf lands might have been cursed, and there's many Night Elf spirits that can't find peace.
Azuna, I think it could be summed up as kind of like abandonment. A ghost town kind of thing, but it's a Night Elf ghost town. Something's not right. Everybody left in a hurry, and they haven't come back.
Azuna was really challenging zone to make. This wildly varied, beautiful landscape that wasn't overly colourful. We were kind of aiming for this Greco-Roman Arcadian feel with long sweeping mountain ranges. But at the same time, it was ripped apart by this tragedy. Ultimately, the team really managed to kind of pull it together.
Val'sharah is thoroughly druid, very magical. When our concept artist was working on the trees for that zone, he had these majestic, giant trees, and as soon as I saw that, I was just so floored.
Val'sharah is one of our more forested zones in Broken Isles. I think one of the more interesting things about Val'sharah is that it's actually one of the first opportunities we've had to really show what it's like when the nightmare gets unleashed on Azeroth.
Val'sharah is the idea of druidism taken to its nth potential, and it's now corrupted and threatened by the nightmare.
There's a lot of places of it that are still luscious forest, but you really feel what parts are really being overcome by the nightmare and the other parts that are still like a safe place to be as you're exploring and questing through Val'sharah.
In Val'sharah is a world tree known as Shaladrisil. This world tree was feeding nature. With the Legion's arrival, the world tree has fallen into corruption. The Emerald Nightmare is now a wound at the heart of this world tree that is threatening to overtake all of Val'sharah and ultimately the world. So the world tree really serves as a symbol of both hope and hopelessness.
Val'sharah is the epitome of fantasy and druid forest. It's the jewel that we wanted this expansion to have. But we didn't quite see what Val'sharah really was until everything came together. The buildings, the creatures that were in the zone, all of those elements had to be there for us to complete the vision.
The High Mountain Tauren are the keepers of the relic of Khaz'goroth. This is the pillar of creation that we need to take out the Tomb of Sargeras.
High Mountain ties together the region geographically in terms of elevation, but it's also where we put all our lore for Tauren, and we really let players experience that culture. It's always challenging to create a zone with a lot of verticality in it.
For High Mountain in particular, especially since it has a whole bunch of different elevation changes, we'll identify what could affect the sound at that elevation, whether or not it's trees or doesn't have trees, whether it's next to a coast, whether it's next to a canyon or a crevasse or at the summit.
What we really wanted to capture it with High Mountain was this enormous, majestic, rocky mountain peak. You can clearly see its influence on the world around it.
Throughout the whole expansion, you can look at the highest peak in High Mountain and say, hey, that's where the center of the expansion is.
It's one of those zones that landed pretty squarely on the original concept, so end result is really, really strong.
Stormheim is the home of a sect of Vrykul that left Northrend thousands of years ago to escape the curse of flesh that was cast upon them, as well as to find what they would consider their holy land. Amongst them, there is one leader, and he is their God King, because he speaks for both heaven and hell, and his word is law.
In Stormheim, the player is needing to go into the heart of the Vrykul kingdom to obtain one of the other Titan relics that will be needed at the Tomb of Sargeras, and this is against the backdrop of Queen Sylvanas attempting to secure her afterlife.
As players that are familiar with the Vrykul now, we'll get to find out the relationship between the Vrykul and the Valkyr, and what happens to Vrykul after they meet glorious death in combat, and we're really playing with that idea of exploring their afterlife, both good and bad.
The Vrykul believe in victory and glory and death, and only the most honorable will ever reach the halls of valor.
It'll be the epitome of what the Vrykul would have imagined for their heaven. You will be able to go to Helheim through the Mystic Temple, which is a fantastic, interesting area. That is probably one of my favorite POIs. So it's going to be a nice stark contrast for the mood and lighting.
We kind of wanted this split-level feel to Stormlight. We're down low, it's very rocky, coastal, rough seas, and up high on the highlands, it's a little bit more mysterious. We also wanted this very ancient, old feel to make sure that we represented the Vrykul, having been here for quite some time, that they had ancient roots here that really helped shape the landscape.
The Broken Isles was once known as Suramar. This vast, sprawling night elf civilization that lived there were able to actually build a shield of such tremendous power to keep out the world's sundering. Night elves of this area for 10,000 years have lived in this gigantic magical bubble.
Suramar is one of the zones in the expansion that will feel very, very much developed, very structured. It's an urban environment.
The other wonderful thing about Suramar, it is a seafaring city and has canals running through the city streets with boats. We make it at night, like it's being lit by the moon. So we've got these beautiful, very subdued blues and moonlight colors, but then we're bringing in warms like the oranges and the firelight to underlight it. So it's just going to be just a very dramatic, beautiful zone.
It's probably the most ambitious zone we've set out to do. It was a really tall order for the art team, and they were really excited about chasing this down. I think it's one of the best zones we've ever put together.
For this expansion, we're actually doing something very different. It's up to the player to figure out for themselves what zone they want to tackle first. It's the first time we've ever sort of given players this unbounded exploration right off the bat.
Having the freedom to go to whichever zone you want to go to and kind of decide the order you want to play it, that's pretty powerful.
We want this to be the crowning jewel of expansions we've made thus far. We really wanted to give the players a sense of exploration, that this is their world to explore in any way they choose. Honestly, it's magic, and it's something that we were really, really excited about.
Each expansion we make weapons, and this time around we were doing something super different, which is we are only making artifact weapons. The weapons became one of the most important things in the entire game.
In this expansion, the Legion is the greatest threat that Azeroth has ever seen, and players are going to need to be able to get these legendary artifacts to help take on the Legion.
Artifact weapons are essentially powerful extensions of the player's classes themselves. They grow alongside the player, they gain powers alongside the player, they enhance the player's abilities as they fight in combat.
The artifact is an item that you're going to carry with you for the entirety of the expansion. This is all about giving the player the ability to customize these super powerful weapons.
We were looking for new ways for players to customize their characters and delivering on the fantasy that players have of what wielding a powerful weapon means. And as soon as we decided on artifact weapons as a central feature for Legion, we knew this was the perfect opportunity to make that happen.
The inclusion of artifact weapons into the storyline, into the player's path, is a super exciting component of this next expansion. There's been any number of like super legendary weapons, over the franchise's history. It felt natural putting these big crazy artifacts into players' hands.
The Maw of the Damned, the Blades of the Fallen Prince, the Claws of Ursoc. Some of these weapons are some of the most well-known. Doomhammer is the mace wielded by Thrall. That's kind of the iconic part of Thrall's identity. But in the time of Legion, the hammer has forsaken him, and it's time for him to pass it on to a new owner. And that owner happens to be you, the player.
We've also invented a lot of new origin stories for weapons you've never heard of before, weapons that have existed in our fiction, but that will be entirely new to the players. When we thought about the fantasy of wielding an artifact weapon, we thought it was really important that every player feel like they have something unique and powerful of their own. So we wanted to make sure that we had a wide breadth of different weapons available to the players. So in the end, we decided 36 individual artifact weapons for every single class spec in the game.
Then on top of that, we decided to kind of do different variations for each one. probably around 200 individual weapons.
So this time around, we really focused on embellishing our weapons audio systems.
When you wield this thing and bashing this thing, it just sounds epic and it's just heroic, and you feel that.
This is a whole different way of doing it. We had to basically create all of these systems for the designers to be able to make it work.
This expansion isn't going to actually have weapon drops like most expansions do. Towards the beginning of the expansion, you're going to get your hands on the artifact that belongs to your class, and you're going to be growing it and evolving it and changing it.
That way, really a player is going to, rather than pick up a weapon and use it for a little bit and throw it away, they're able to invest more in the one that is kind of the most epic and the most interesting.
It's the first time we've ever done any kind of weapon leveling system, but this brings it well and beyond to a whole new system. It's almost as if we're adding a whole new talent system on top of a specific weapon or item.
We settled on the idea of having artifacts level up in parallel to your own character to give players a sense of alternate progression. As you're exploring the Broken Isles, you'll also be getting artifact power that makes your weapon stronger.
So as you progress to unlocking new abilities and powers, your artifact becomes the ultimate weapon.
Artifacts being able to gain experience on their own alongside the player was really important to us because it gave us a great avenue towards extended advancement, so that kind of progression can last far longer into the end game.
There's such a back and forth with engineers and designers. We had to figure out ways of making it so that as the player is playing the game, be it in doing adventure mode or doing questing or doing raiding or whatever, they're earning these artifact points.
Artifact points are what you get by spending artifact power so that you can power up your weapon and unlock the different abilities. When you have an artifact point to spend, you can choose what ability that's connected to the other traits that you've gotten to unlock and make your weapon more powerful.
Artifact traits are going to be purchased by spending the artifact power that you've earned. We laid out the trait trees in a very different way. They're not the traditional linear talent trees. Rather, they're more, constellation-like pictorials to kind of give players more of this hands-on interactive experience to customize the weapon to really suit the class that you want to play.
Each artifact also has 3 different tiers of visual progression. You have the ability to decide what look you want. For example, if we're talking about the Ashbringer, an artifact that's been wielded by Tyrion Fordring, and it's really something that was developed in the lore of the World of Warcraft itself. You have the ability to go after the Lightning Ashbringer, or the Fire Ashbringer, or the Corrupted Ashbringer. And then even within that, you can choose from a variety of different colors to make that artifact look the way you think is the coolest.
When we started thinking about all the different visual customizations for these artifacts, it was a huge goal of ours to make sure each player had their own unique look. And we put a lot of time and effort into making sure players had the ability to choose.
Players can unlock these appearances and then choose the one that they like the best. It's a bit about self-expression. It's also about, standing out from the rest of the crowd.
We grinded all the way to have it look different. We want it to sound different as well. If you have a flaming Ashbringer or lightning, we want it to sound different as you're swinging it.
My favorite artifact is probably the Blades of the Fallen Prince that perfectly capture the fantasy of what Death Knight Runeblade should look like.
I think my favorite visual customization that we did was this fell Doomhammer. The Frostwolf symbol has been replaced with this creepy eye, and it has this kind of green fell oozing out of it.
One of my favorite weapons out of the artifacts we've built is the Scale of the Earth Warder. It's this shield for prot warriors that actually comes from an ancient Vrykul king who had found a scale of Naltharion long ago in High Mountain. That's what I love most about the visual customization. I can really kind of choose my ideal version of what that weapon would be. I think players are going to be pleased with the greater variety of content they have to experience this time around, and actually give them a whole wide range of traits and powers that they can unlock months into their experience.
World of Warcraft for many people is more than just a game, it is part of their lifestyle. This time around, we're going to do it up big.
The idea of Demon Hunters being an actual playable class has been a fictional idea we've been playing with for years. They're out there on the edge, giving everything, to stem the tide of this evil. They're ultimately heroic, and so it's awesome to finally be able to design that class out and to be able to step into these groups and embody this archetype that's been so kind of classically woven into the story of Warcraft over the years.
When we decided to make the Demon Hunter as the 12th class in World of Warcraft, we knew that it was an exciting opportunity to actually carve out a unique space in the game. And it's something that we've always wanted to find a way to fit into our world. The Legion expansion was just the perfect fit, and we couldn't be more excited to finally make it happen.
Demon Hunter has a lot of lore. I mean, players of the game have really wanted to play as a character like Illidan.
People can finally experience this ultimate badassery of being a demon hunter. You start out at a high level, near max level, because we want you to be able to jump into the action as quickly as possible and do what you were designed to do, and that is kill the demons, save Azeroth.
This is the first time ever that players are going to be able to play a Demon Hunter in World of Warcraft. Creating Demon Hunters was a very, very collaborative process.
Who doesn't want to work on, the sound of making a demonic army that's back to destroy everything in sight? I mean, that's like a sound designer's dream. It's like what you want to work on,
We decided to make a custom start zone for the Demon Hunter because it really allows us to tell a story where the Demon Hunters have their own unique place, and in this case, their own time, as they actually start during the events of the Burning Crusade expansion. When the Black Temple was being raided, Illidan sent your character along with an army to go invade a demon world.
And that really allows us to make a very cool, very directed experience for someone who's picking up this class.
We had a lot of discussions about what specs we were going to do for the Demon Hunters. And as soon as we knew we were going with Havoc and Vengeance, we really started to buckle down and dig into what each of these meant.
One of them is DPS, and that would be Havoc. And one of them is for tank, and that's Vengeance. We felt like those were very important because they felt appropriate to the Demon Hunter class.
The tank form is just this huge, massive demon. You're just using your brute strength. You're not able to wield a weapon, so combat is all unarmed combat.
The DPS spec, that's all about agility, offense, darting around, striking from all sides.
Ultimately, you have this Demon Hunter that just wants to be in melee, but with the mobility to get to your enemies more easily.
We wanted to give players the chance to live that fantasy as a demon hunter along the lines of Illidan, but we really wanted to give players a lot of customization. Players pick their horns, pick different skins, different faces to really feel like their own unique demon hunter.
The Metamorphosis ability is one of the core abilities for the Demon Hunter to transform into a demon that looks like their character.
Both Havoc and Vengeance have Metamorphosis. Havoc has wings, whereas the tank gets these huge spikes on their back and they get this mane of Bellfire. They're just saying, like, I'm unmovable. Just come at me, bro.
They just feel edgy and dark, badass. Like visually, they look awesome.
We wanted to make sure there were very visual, iconic ways that Demon Hunters were uniquely represented in the Warcraft universe. So we've incorporated the idea of having these different tattoos.
These huge glowing tattoos have lore behind them. That's how they harness demonic power. On the cool side for the player, they design the armor so that you can see the tattoos all the time.
The Demon Hunter has a definite unique sound. It's a little more powerful, a little more gruff, gritty, a little more demonic.
They do have glaives. Their blades are just pockmarked and gashed and gouged and rough, and they're rusty, and you get hit by this thing. It's not a smooth shing, it's more like
Doing a new class is a tremendous amount of work. It adds tremendous amounts of complexity to the game. So as we're working on the Demon Hunter class, as we're shooting out ideas to try out and making tasks for engineering to create the abilities, we were going to embrace mobility and we were going to embrace a more streamlined control system.
We set out from the start to make agile combat the center of almost everything the Demon Hunter does. They dart around, they zip through their enemies. They use their wings to actually double jump.
The double jump allows them to jump again while they're in the air to get over obstacles that other character classes wouldn't be able to get over. They have the ability to automatically glide.
When you glide, you have big demon wings that pop out of you, and that's how you actually slow your descent.
I wanted something like that powerful where the wings, snap out, and so I end up using this old sail for my boat. So we got some cool elements for the...
Spectral Sight allows the Demon Hunter to see enemies through walls, see invisible creatures, stealth creatures more easily, and also to be able to see treasures.
For the Spectral Sight sound, we recorded using a lot of animals and voice stuff. I created these cool little texture layers of...
We knew that we wanted them to incorporate movement in their attack. Fell Rush captures a little bit of that like agile ninja fantasy. That's the essence of what Demon Hunter is about.
You can perform the Fell Rush when you're coming out of your backflip. If you can time it right, it'll be really quick and deadly.
We are focusing on that super inhuman agility, combined with the demonic magic, and then ultimately, your ability to just release that demonic magic in both controlled ways and uncontrolled ways.
The Demon Hunter is one of the most unique features of the expansion because it's a completely new class that has a lot of very distinct elements to it.
Bringing that class to life is really one of the most collaborative cross-discipline projects we've had on the WoW team. We've never worked more closely with our animation team and our character artists to really nail the fantasy of each and every one of the abilities.
It was really important to give them unique animations. We want to make sure that the players feel special when they're playing this class.
We put a lot of effort, a lot of time, a lot of thought into what they look like, how they play. I think a lot of the hardened kind of veteran players of World of Warcraft are really gonna love the Demon Hunter.
I think it's really cool for them to have another class to look at, to maybe play, but also to play with. Even just having that one different piece in your raid or your dungeon is going to create a whole new dynamic. You are going to be the Demon Hunter.